Ethan Blake's senses stirred before his eyes opened. The faint rhythm of machines echoed in the sterile air, each beep a reminder that he was alive. Barely. His body felt foreign, weighed down by pain and weakness, but it was his mind that bore the heaviest burden. Flashes of memory, fractured and incomplete, danced in the shadows of his confusion. As his awareness sharpened, so did the voices around him. One, soft but laced with something sinister, pierced through the haze. "Yes, darling," the voice said, almost a whisper. "Everything is ready. The will is in my favor. Once he's gone, it will all be ours." Ethan's heart clenched as he recognized the voice. It was Amelia, his wife. The words cut through him like a blade. Pretending to remain unconscious, he cracked his eyelids just enough to glimpse her standing by his bedside. Her posture was confident, her tone icy and calculated as she ended the call. The realization struck like a thunderbolt. Amelia, the woman he had trusted and loved, was plotting his demise, conspiring to take everything he had built. Worse still, she wasn't alone in her treachery. The chill of betrayal swept over him, leaving him frozen in place. In the cocoon of silence that followed her departure, Ethan's thoughts spiraled. How had it come to this? The love they once shared had withered, replaced by secrets, deceit, and greed. He couldn't move yet, couldn't confront her. Not now. He needed to gather strength, to plan. He needed to fight back. And so, as the machines continued their steady chorus, Ethan Blake made a vow to himself. This was not the end. It was only the beginning. Ethan lay still, the weight of Amelia's words pressing heavily on his chest. As he feigned unconsciousness, fragments of memories began to surface, each one like a shard of broken glass cutting through his mind. He had trusted her once, trusted her completely, but the signs had been there, hadn't they? He hadn't wanted to see them. Amelia's late-night phone calls, her growing indifference to their marriage, the way she had stopped laughing at his jokes or even noticing him when he entered a room. Ethan had attributed it to the stress of life, to the natural ebb and flow of a relationship. But now, as the pieces fell into place, he realized he had ignored his instincts for far too long. The memory of the accident returned in haunting clarity. That night, his suspicions had become unbearable. He had followed Amelia to a high-end hotel, parking at a distance, his heart pounding with both dread and hope. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. But as he watched her step out of her car and greet another man with a kiss, any illusions he clung to shattered. Ethan had sat in his car for hours afterward, staring into the void. The city lights blurred as tears filled his eyes. How could she do this? How long had it been going on? The questions were endless, but they offered no comfort, no resolution. Gripping the steering wheel, he had driven aimlessly, his mind too clouded by emotion to notice the red light or the truck barreling toward him. The impact had been devastating, and the pain that followed had been nothing compared to the betrayal he now faced. As he lay in the sterile hospital room, every ache in his body seemed to echo the ache in his heart. Amelia's voice still lingered in his ears, cold and calculated. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. Ethan knew he couldn't act rashly. If Amelia believed he was helpless, she would lower her guard. He needed to play the part of a broken man while quietly reclaiming his strength. More importantly, he needed help, someone he could trust. Days passed in agonizing slowness. Amelia would visit occasionally, putting on a facade of concern when doctors were nearby, but barely sparing him a glance once they were gone. Her calls became more frequent, and though she kept her voice low, Ethan caught enough to piece together her scheme. She was preparing to move forward with the will, assuming he wouldn't survive much longer. One evening, as the hum of the machines lulled the hospital into a quiet rhythm, a soft knock sounded at his door. A nurse stepped in, a new face, young but with a calm, reassuring presence. Her name tag read Claire Jacobs. Her touch was gentle as she checked his vitals, and her voice carried genuine warmth as she spoke. "Mr. Blake," she said softly, not knowing he was awake. "I'm here to make sure you're comfortable. If there's anything you need, just let me know." Ethan felt a flicker of hope. There was something about Claire that felt different from the other staff. Her compassion, her kindness. She wasn't just going through the motions. She cared. He knew he had to take a risk. That night, when Claire returned to his room, Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "Claire, please don't be alarmed, but I need your help." Claire froze, her eyes widening in surprise. "You're awake?" she whispered, glancing toward the door. "Does anyone else know?" "No," Ethan said, his voice strained. "And I need it to stay that way. My wife. She's planning something terrible. I need time to figure it out." Claire hesitated, her brow furrowing with concern. "Are you sure you're ready to talk about this? You've been through so much." "I don't have a choice," Ethan said, his voice trembling but resolute. "If I don't act, I'll lose everything. Not just my diner, but my life." Claire studied him for a moment before nodding. "Okay," she said firmly, "but you need to promise me one thing. We do this carefully. No rushing, no risking your health." Ethan managed a faint smile. "You have my word." Over the next few days, Claire became Ethan's quiet ally. She helped him regain his strength in secret, encouraging him to take small steps toward recovery. Late at night, she would smuggle in extra food to help him rebuild his energy and coached him through short walks around the room when no one was watching. Bit by bit, Ethan felt himself growing stronger, both in body and resolve. But the clock was ticking. Amelia's visits grew less frequent, her confidence in her plan evident in her absence. Ethan knew the time was coming when he would have to leave the hospital and face the world she had tried to take from him. With Claire by his side, he began to map out his escape and, more importantly, his path to reclaiming everything he had lost. Ethan's escape was planned down to the smallest detail. Every night, after the hospital staff finished their rounds, Claire would bring him updates. She had secured plain clothes for him, loose enough to hide his hospital gown underneath, and found a driver she trusted to take them where they needed to go. It was risky, but Ethan knew the longer he stayed, the more dangerous it became. Amelia's confidence meant she would act soon. Finally, the night came. Claire entered his room just before midnight, her footsteps light as she wheeled in a supply cart. Beneath a pile of blankets and equipment was a folded hoodie, sweatpants, and sneakers. Ethan sat up, his body aching but his resolve unshaken. "Are you sure about this?" Claire asked, her voice low but urgent. "You're still weak, Ethan. This could be dangerous." Ethan met her gaze, his eyes determined. "It's more dangerous for me to stay here. Amelia could make her next move at any time. I can't risk it." Claire nodded, helping him into the clothes. She wrapped his foreline carefully under the sleeve, ensuring it was hidden but still functional. Once he was dressed, she placed a baseball cap on his head, pulling it low over his face. The two shared a quick look, an unspoken agreement that this was the moment. They moved cautiously through the dimly lit halls, Claire pushing Ethan in a wheelchair. The hospital was eerily quiet, save for the occasional beep of a monitor or the hum of fluorescent lights. They encountered a nurse at the front desk, but Claire flashed her ID badge with practiced ease. The nurse barely glanced up, engrossed in paperwork. When they reached the back exit, Claire's driver, a middle-aged man named Paul who looked more like a retired teacher than a getaway driver, was waiting in an old sedan. He gave them a quick nod, opening the rear door for Ethan. "Let's get you out of here," Paul said, his voice calm and steady. As the car pulled away from the hospital, Ethan exhaled deeply, taking in the cool night air. The world outside felt unfamiliar after weeks confined to a sterile room. The lights of the city blurred past the window, but his focus was on the road ahead. For the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. When they arrived at Ethan's house, the sight before him made his stomach churn. The locks had been changed, and through the window, he could see the silhouette of a man lounging in his living room, Amelia's lover. The man was wearing Ethan's robe, drinking from one of Ethan's favorite coffee mugs. Fury bubbled up inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I can't just walk in," Ethan murmured to Claire. "They've made this their home." "You don't have to," Claire said, "but you can confront them. Let them know you're not gone." Ethan nodded, steeling himself. He rang the doorbell. The footsteps approaching were slow, deliberate, and when the door swung open, he came face to face with the man who had taken everything from him. "Who the hell are you?" The man sneered. his expression turning smug. "You're not supposed to be here." Before Ethan could respond, Amelia appeared behind him, her face pale as she saw her husband standing there. "Ethan," she stammered. "But you're supposed to be dead?" Ethan finished, his voice low but sharp. "Not quite." Amelia's lover stepped forward, his chest puffed out in a weak attempt to intimidate Ethan. "You need to leave," he said, his tone dismissive. "This isn't your house anymore." Ethan's gaze hardened, his voice cold and steady. "I'm not going anywhere. You have 5 minutes to pack your things and get out before I call the police." The man faltered, glancing back at Amelia, who was frozen in shock. "Amelia?" he prompted, clearly expecting her to take charge. But Amelia's confidence had crumbled. She stammered weak excuses, trying to explain away her betrayal. "Ethan, I thought you were gone. I didn't know." "Save it," Ethan interrupted, his voice cutting through her protests. "I heard everything. The phone calls. The plans. You were ready to take everything I've worked for, everything we built together, and throw it away for him." Amelia's lover opened his mouth to argue, but Ethan took a step forward, his presence silencing him. "You can leave on your own," Ethan said, "or I'll have the authorities remove you." The man hesitated but ultimately grabbed his coat, muttering curses under his breath as he stormed out. Amelia lingered, her eyes darting around as if searching for something to say. But there was nothing. Without another word, she followed her lover out, leaving Ethan standing in the doorway of his own home. Inside, the house felt foreign. The furniture had been rearranged, the walls stripped of any trace of his presence. But it was still his home, and he was determined to reclaim it. Ethan collapsed onto the couch, his body trembling from the exertion. Claire knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "They're gone." Ethan nodded, his jaw clenched. "This is just the beginning. I've taken back my house, but I need to take back my life. My diner. Everything they tried to destroy." Claire smiled, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "Then let's get started." The next day, Ethan and Claire visited the diner. The familiar smell of coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air as they stepped inside. The staff froze, their eyes widening in disbelief as they recognized their boss. "Mr. Blake?" Frank, the janitor, approached hesitantly. "Is it really you? We thought." Ethan offered a tired but genuine smile. "It's me, Frank, and I have a lot to explain." As the staff gathered, Ethan recounted his ordeal, thanking them for their loyalty during his absence. When he finished, he turned to Frank and Sarah, the dishwasher who had warned him about the accident. "Frank, Sarah, I owe you both more than I can say. Your loyalty kept this place alive, and it's time I start showing my gratitude." Sarah's eyes welled with tears as Ethan announced her promotion to assistant chef, while Frank beamed with pride as he was named operations manager. The diner staff erupted into applause, their faith in Ethan reaffirmed. But there was one more person Ethan needed to find: Jake, the homeless man who had saved him from the wreckage. "I think I know where to find him," Claire said, determination in her voice. Together, they set out to track him down, ready to repay the kindness that had saved Ethan's life. Ethan and Claire drove through the city's quieter streets, searching for Jake, the man who had pulled him from the car wreck. The journey was somber, each passing block a reminder of how close Ethan had come to losing everything. Claire guided the car toward the old warehouse district, where Jake was known to stay. The area was desolate, its crumbling buildings and empty lots bathed in the faint orange glow of streetlights. Finally, near the back of an abandoned warehouse, they spotted him, a weary figure sitting against the wall, his jacket threadbare and his expression distant. Ethan's heart sank. This man had saved his life, and yet society had left him behind. "Jake," Ethan called softly as they approached. The man looked up, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. "Do I know you?" he asked, his voice rough but curious. "It's me," Ethan said, kneeling carefully despite his weak knees. "Ethan Blake, you saved me from the car accident." Recognition dawned on Jake's face. "You're the guy from the wreck," he said slowly. "Didn't think you'd make it." "I almost didn't," Ethan admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "And if it weren't for you, I wouldn't be standing here today. I owe you my life." Jake shrugged, his demeanor guarded. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You did what most wouldn't. And I'm here to repay that kindness." Jake frowned, his skepticism evident. "How?" "I don't need charity." "This isn't charity," Ethan replied. "It's an opportunity. Come work at my diner. Let me help you rebuild your life, the way you helped save mine." Jake hesitated, his gaze flickering to Claire, who gave him a gentle nod. "We could really use someone like you," she said, her voice warm and encouraging. "You've already proven you're brave and selfless. That's more than enough to start." After a long pause, Jake nodded slowly. "I don't know if I'm cut out for it, but I'll give it a try." Ethan smiled, a weight lifting from his shoulders. "That's all I ask. Let's get you cleaned up and started." The next morning, Ethan, Claire, and Jake returned to the diner. The staff was bustling with morning prep, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. As they walked in, the team turned to stare at Jake, unsure of who he was. "This is Jake," Ethan announced, his voice steady. "He's the man who saved my life, and he's joining us as our new manager. Please make him feel welcome." Jake shifted uncomfortably under the staff's curious gazes, but Frank was the first to step forward, extending a hand. "Welcome, Jake. If you saved Ethan, you've already earned my respect." One by one, the staff introduced themselves, their initial hesitation melting away. Ethan felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just a workplace, it was a family. Over the next few weeks, Jake proved himself indispensable. His street smarts and resourcefulness helped him navigate challenges with ease. From managing the inventory to resolving customer complaints, he adapted quickly, earning the respect of the staff and customers alike. Meanwhile, Ethan threw himself into the day-to-day operations of the diner. Working alongside Sarah in the kitchen, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The meals they prepared weren't just food. They were symbols of resilience, served with care and pride. Claire took on more responsibility as well, balancing her nursing shifts with helping Ethan streamline the diner's operations. Her presence brought a warmth and stability that the entire team relied on. She and Ethan grew closer, their bond deepening as they worked together to rebuild what had been broken. But Ethan's focus wasn't solely on the diner. He hadn't forgotten the betrayal that had nearly destroyed him. Late one evening, as the diner closed, he gathered his core team, Claire, Jake, Frank, and Sarah, into the office. "We've come a long way," Ethan began, his voice calm but resolute. "But there's one thing left to do. Amelia and her lover didn't just betray me. They tried to ruin everything I've worked for. I can't let them get away with it." The room fell silent as his words sank in. Finally, Jake leaned forward. "I know someone who can help," he said. "A private investigator. He's good and he owes me a favor." Ethan nodded, grateful for Jake's initiative. "Let's do it. The sooner we have proof, the sooner we can bring them to justice." Over the next week, Jake coordinated with the investigator, a grizzled man named Tony. While Tony dug into Amelia's financial records and personal dealings, Ethan focused on keeping the diner running smoothly. He wanted to make sure his team felt secure, even as he prepared for the storm ahead. One evening, Tony called with an update. "I've got everything," he said. "Bank records, phone logs, even emails. Your wife and her lover were behind your accident. They wanted you out of the picture, permanently." Ethan's hands trembled as he hung up the phone. It was one thing to suspect betrayal, it was another to see it confirmed. But he wasn't broken by the revelation. If anything, it fueled his determination. "We have what we need," Ethan told Claire, Jake, Frank, and Sarah as they gathered in the office. "It's time to take this to the authorities." Ethan and Claire arrived at the police station early the next morning, their steps steady despite the weight of the evidence they carried. The folder in Ethan's hands felt heavier than its contents. It represented the betrayal, pain, and danger he had endured. Claire walked beside him, her presence a quiet reassurance. Inside, they met Detective Harris, a seasoned officer with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Harris gestured for them to sit as Ethan placed the folder on the desk between them. "This," Ethan began, his voice steady but low with anger. Is everything you need to prove my wife and her lover conspired against me? They didn't just betray me. They tried to kill me. Harris opened the folder, flipping through its contents. Bank records showing suspicious transfers, call logs detailing communication between Amelia and her lover, and emails explicitly planning Ethan's demise were all there. Harris's brow furrowed as he read, his lips tightening into a thin line. This is damning evidence, he said after a long pause. If this checks out, we're looking at charges of conspiracy, attempted murder, and fraud. But you need to be prepared for a legal fight. People like your wife and her lover don't go down without a battle. Ethan met his gaze, his voice firm. I've been fighting since the day I woke up in that hospital. I'm not stopping now. Harris nodded. We'll launch an investigation immediately. You've done your part. Now let us handle the rest. As Ethan and Claire left the station, a sense of relief washed over him. The wheels of justice were finally turning, but there was still a long road ahead, and he knew he needed to stay strong, not just for himself but for the team and the diner that depended on him. Back at the diner, word of Ethan's fight for justice began to spread. Customers who had known Ethan for years rallied behind him, their loyalty unwavering. Regulars who once came for a cup of coffee or a meal now came to show their support, filling the diner with a sense of solidarity. Frank, ever the steady presence, worked tirelessly to keep the diner running smoothly. Don't worry about the day-to-day, he told Ethan one evening. We've got this. You focus on what you need to do. Sarah, now thriving in her role as assistant chef, introduced new menu items that drew even more customers. This place is our second home, she said with a smile. We're not letting it go without a fight. Jake, meanwhile, had fully embraced his role as manager. He handled challenges with ease, his street smarts and quick thinking proving invaluable. He even started training new staff, ensuring the diner had the support it needed to thrive. As the investigation progressed, Detective Harris kept Ethan updated. We've arrested your wife and her lover, he said during a phone call one afternoon. The evidence is strong, but the trial will take time. Be prepared. Ethan shared the news with his team that evening. It's not over yet, he told them. But we're one step closer to justice. The diner erupted into applause, the staff and customers cheering for Ethan's perseverance. Claire squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with pride. You've come so far, she said softly. No matter what happens, you've already won. As the weeks passed, Ethan found himself drawn closer to the people around him. The diner wasn't just a business. It was a community, a family. Late one evening, as the last customers left, Ethan gathered his core team in the office. I want to thank you all, he began, his voice thick with emotion. This place wouldn't be standing without you. You're not just employees, you're family. Frank raised his coffee cup. To resilience and loyalty, he said, his voice steady. To new beginnings, Claire added, her gaze warm as she looked at Ethan. The others joined in the toast, their voices echoing in the quiet office. In that moment, Ethan realized that the battle for justice wasn't just about reclaiming what he had lost. It was about building something stronger, something lasting. The day of the trial arrived, and Ethan Blake found himself standing in a courtroom filled with tension. The polished wooden benches, the solemn faces of the jury, and the sharp gaze of the judge created an atmosphere that felt both intimidating and empowering. Ethan was no stranger to challenges, but this was a different kind of battle, one that required patience and an unshakable resolve. Amelia and her lover sat at the defendant's table, their confident demeanor cracking under the weight of the evidence. The prosecution presented Tony's findings with precision, bank statements showing stolen funds, call logs outlining their plans, and emails revealing their ultimate goal, to eliminate Ethan entirely. The court gasped as the prosecutor described how Amelia had orchestrated the car accident, intending for Ethan to die so she could inherit his diner and fortune. Ethan took the stand, his voice steady as he recounted the betrayal, the accident, and his recovery. I trusted her, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She was my partner, my wife, and she tried to take everything from me. Not just my business, but my life. I'm here today because of the people who believed in me when she didn't. Claire watched from the gallery, her hands clasped tightly as Ethan spoke. Beside her, Frank, Sarah, and Jake listened intently, their expressions a mixture of anger and pride. The defense tried to argue that Amelia had been coerced by her lover, but the evidence was overwhelming. After days of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty on all counts. As the judge handed down their sentences, lengthy prison terms for both Amelia and her lover, Ethan felt a wave of relief wash over him. Justice had been served, and the chapter of betrayal was finally closed. Back at the diner, the atmosphere was electric. News of the trial's outcome had spread, and customers filled every table, celebrating not just Ethan's victory but the resilience of the diner itself. Balloons and streamers adorned the walls, and the scent of Sarah's new signature dishes wafted through the air. Ethan stood at the counter, greeting customers with a smile that reflected his newfound peace. Claire worked beside him, her touch on his shoulder a constant reminder of her support. Jake moved through the crowd with ease, checking in with tables and ensuring everyone felt welcome. As the evening wound down, Ethan gathered his core team, Claire, Frank, Sarah, and Jake, in the office. The air was thick with anticipation as he stood before them. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Ethan began, his voice steady but emotional. "This diner isn't just mine anymore. It belongs to all of us. Frank, Sarah, Jake, and Claire. You've all poured your hearts into this place. It's time I show you how much that means to me." He turned to Frank first. "Frank, you've been the backbone of this diner for years. I want you to step into the role of operations manager officially. Your experience and loyalty are invaluable." Frank's eyes widened, his voice cracking as he replied, "Thank you, Ethan. I won't let you down." Next, Ethan addressed Sarah. "Sarah, your hard work and creativity have taken our kitchen to new heights. You're not just an assistant chef. You're the head chef this diner deserves." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth in shock. "Head chef? I don't know what to say. Thank you." Then, he turned to Jake. "Jake, you've proven yourself time and again. Your resourcefulness and leadership have earned you the position of general manager. I trust you to keep this place running smoothly." Jake nodded, his voice calm but filled with gratitude. "You won't regret this, Ethan." Finally, Ethan faced Claire. "And Claire, none of this would have been possible without you. You saw me when I was at my weakest and helped me find the strength to fight back. You've become my partner in more ways than one, and I want to make that official." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. As he opened it to reveal a diamond ring, Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Claire Jacobs," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "will you marry me?" The room fell silent, the air heavy with emotion. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." The team erupted into cheers, their celebration echoing through the diner. Ethan slipped the ring onto Claire's finger, his heart full of hope and love. The weeks following the trial and proposal brought a renewed sense of purpose to Ethan Blake's life. The diner, now thriving under its revamped leadership, had become more than just a business. It was a symbol of resilience, community, and second chances. Ethan's team worked seamlessly, each embracing their roles with dedication and pride. Frank, in his new position as operations manager, had implemented streamlined processes that boosted efficiency. His attention to detail ensured that every shift ran smoothly, from inventory management to scheduling. Customers began to notice the transformation, leaving glowing reviews about the diner's friendly atmosphere and exceptional service. Sarah, now head chef, dazzled customers with her culinary creativity. She introduced seasonal menus, blending traditional comfort food with innovative dishes that quickly became local favorites. One evening, as Ethan tasted her latest creation, a decadent honey-glazed pork chop, he smiled. "Sarah," he said, "you're turning this place into a destination." Jake, ever resourceful, embraced his role as general manager. He established connections with local suppliers, negotiated better deals, and even organized community events at the diner. One such event, a pay-it-forward night, encouraged customers to donate meals for those in need. The turnout exceeded all expectations, leaving the team both exhausted and elated. Through it all, Claire remained Ethan's rock. As they planned their wedding, she continued to support him both at the diner and in his personal journey. Together, they worked to create not just a thriving business but a safe haven for everyone who walked through the diner's doors. But Ethan wasn't content to stop there. Inspired by the kindness of people like Jake and Claire, he began exploring ways to give back to the community that had stood by him. One afternoon, he called his core team into the office for an announcement. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he began, looking around the room at the people who had become his family. "This diner has given me a second chance, and I want to use it to give others the same opportunity." Ethan outlined his plan, a foundation funded by the diner's profits to support people in need. Whether it was helping the homeless, providing scholarships, or offering job training programs, the team listened in awe, their admiration for Ethan growing with every word. Jake was the first to speak. "Count me in," he said firmly. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. I want to help others find their footing too." The others quickly echoed his sentiment, and together, they began laying the groundwork for the Blake Foundation, a project that would extend the diner's mission of hope and second chances far beyond its walls. The grand reopening of the diner was planned as a celebration not just of its success, but of the journey that had brought them there. The event coincided with Ethan and Claire's wedding, a heartfelt ceremony held in the diner's newly renovated garden patio. Strings of twinkling lights hung above, and tables were adorned with fresh flowers and handwritten notes of gratitude from the team. The ceremony was simple but deeply emotional. As Ethan and Claire exchanged vows, their words spoke not only of love but of the strength they had found in each other during the most challenging times. When they kissed, the crowd erupted into cheers, a wave of joy washing over everyone present. Afterward, the celebration continued with a feast prepared by Sarah and her kitchen team. The menu featured Ethan's favorite dishes alongside new creations that honored the team's diverse backgrounds. Frank gave a heartfelt toast, his voice steady as he said, "This diner isn't just a place to eat. It's a place where lives are rebuilt, where hope finds its way back into our hearts." Jake added his own touch to the evening by organizing a raffle, with proceeds going toward the Blake Foundation. Guests eagerly participated, thrilled to contribute to a cause that had already begun making waves in the community. As the night went on, Ethan found himself reflecting on the journey that had led to this moment. He had lost much: trust, stability, and even his sense of self. But he had gained something far greater. The people around him weren't just his team. They were his family. Together, they had turned betrayal into resilience, despair into hope, and broken dreams into a thriving reality. Toward the end of the night, as the last guests lingered and the team gathered for a quiet moment, Ethan raised his glass. "To all of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for standing by me, for believing in me, and for reminding me of what really matters. This is just the beginning." The team clinked their glasses together, their smiles reflecting the warmth and unity they had built. The diner's lights glowed softly in the background, a beacon of hope in the heart of the city. In the months that followed, the Blake Foundation grew, touching countless lives. The diner became a cornerstone of the community, known not just for its food, but for its unwavering commitment to making a difference. Ethan, Claire, Frank, Sarah, Jake, and their extended family at the diner faced new challenges with the confidence that they could overcome anything together. As Ethan walked through the bustling diner one evening, hand in hand with Claire, he paused to take it all in: the laughter, the clinking of dishes, the buzz of conversation. For the first time in a long time, he felt complete. The betrayal and pain of the past had given way to something far more powerful: a future built on trust, love, and an unshakable belief in second chances.